I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Movie Star Magic. And this week we are going to be looking at the career of Diane Lane, one of the most fascinating careers in Hollywood history, because she had this great promising sort of breakout, but never really maybe found her capital G great movie, despite giving capital G great performances. But if you're new to the series, what I do every single week is look at an actor and talk about what their movie star magic is, what is their defining feature that makes them great. I start off by essentially breaking down their career into 3 different chapters, talk about where they were at that time, the type of role that they were doing, how they've evolved as an actor, and then I also talk about a defining role in each of those chapters to help you understand the sort of chapter that they're in, the sort of movies that they were making, and talk about some of the actors' greatest movies. And then at the end I do try to sort of condense and codify my opinions by defining a sort of defining feature of the actor. Try to understand what their movie star magic is, what is their special ingredient that they have that make them such a compelling on-screen presence. So overall, just a great celebration and discussion of the actors. We've been doing it for months now. I hope you guys have been enjoying it. We still got a bunch of guys to do left. We're going to go all the way into October before the Oscar season starts once again. So as always, much appreciated. If you'd like the video, comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on your favorite Diane Lane movies. But without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Starting off with Chapter 1. I'm calling this chapter The Promising Rookie because in 1979, 14-year-old Diane Lane sort of bursts onto the scene with A Little Romance, the George Roy Hill movie, in which she is the lead of the movie, acting opposite Laurence Olivier, one of the greatest actors of all time. She's got the sort of front cover of the Time magazine, sort of positioning her as one of these sort of next big young stars. At age 14, does this sort of incredible performance alongside Olivier in her first film. You know, her father's an acting coach, so there is some little bit sort of promising elements to that. So I call this sort of chapter The Promising Rookie because she starts out really hot. She starts out as this sort of immediate declaration of, wow, this is a really talented actor and we're going to see a lot of her for a long time. And they were right in many ways, but maybe those expectations weren't necessarily fully realized until later on in her career. Because after this movie, she gets into the sort of Francis Ford Coppola circle, doing the S.E. Hinton sort of back-to-back of Rumblefish and The Outsiders. So she's in that Outsiders movie, which is very much the sort of declaration of these are the next young great actors of their time. And then after that, she does 84's The Cotton Club, which was a box office bomb and sort of a huge production nightmare. And you know, that's a successful performance by her. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But, you know, wasn't necessarily her big movie. And then in the sort of 80s, this sort of early promising young season of hers, she does, 89, she does Lonesome Dove, which gets her nominated for an Emmy. So there is sort of a lot of still prestige and promise for her. And for the most part, she's working with good directors, working in good movies. However, this is sort of the end of her promising young rookie season, because when she gets into the 90s and later on, she starts to a little bit make some more poor decisions and doesn't really have, like I said at the beginning of the show, she doesn't really have that capital G great movie. For example, if you look at the cast of The Outsiders, which was seen as these are the great young actors of Hollywood, you see a Tom Cruise, you know, 83 does Outsiders, and then he does Risky Business, and then he does Top Gun, and boom, he's a movie star. Same thing with Patrick Swayze. 83 does Outsiders, then he does Red Dawn in 85, 87, Dirty Dancing, boom, he's a movie star. Even someone like an Emilio Estevez, 84, right after Outsiders, Repo Man, then 85, Breakfast Club, boom, he's a star. And, you know, not everyone in that sort of movie had a next big movie. And of course, we have to talk about the differences between, you know, male and female actors and their sort of opportunities. But Diane Lane's sort of big follow-up post The Outsiders was The Cotton Club, and that really didn't sort of pan out. And then she sort of takes a break from acting for a couple of years, and then does, you know, a couple of interesting projects, you know, culminating in the 80s there with Lonesome Dove. But that is sort of her promising young rookie season, in which she's in movies with good directors where she gives a good performance, but it doesn't totally work entirely. The sort of hype and promise that was sort of built up didn't really manifest in the way that maybe a lot of people thought. And she had a very promising sort of young rookie season in which she does a lot of great performances, and it's clear that she is going to be a great actor, but maybe doesn't find her capital G great movie. But when talking about a defining role for this period of Diane Lane, I went with The Cotton Club because I really do believe her and Richard Gere's romance and her ability to sort of bring more, I think, to the character that is written on the screen and on the page is evident. because she plays this young woman who is barely keeping it together in this very sort of toxic and abusive relationship in which she's sort of like this toy for this very fearful mobster Dutch, played by James Remar. And then Dixie, Richard Gere's character, comes along, and there's clearly sort of an intense, fiery passion with one another, but despite that she has this very sort of cynical and cold exterior shell in which she wants to seem sort of mysterious and seductive. But what Lane is so great at doing is sort of present that exterior, but then also give the audience a glimpse at the interior, that she is someone that is still young and naive in a certain respect, and wants to be loved and has this connection with Richard Gere's character, but she's in this sort of terrible kind of relationship, this odd situation, and she is someone that has sort of seen a lot of things. It seems like she has already, despite being so young, this extremely cynical viewpoint of the world and of this sort of how this sort of mobster situation is run. So as this sort of young but mature performance, this sort of seductive performance, someone who is this kind of great femme fatale character as written, but I think Lane gives a lot of empathy and yearning for love. That sort of added element that is not necessarily always in the script. I think Lane does bring a lot to that, and it really shows that even though The Cotton Club I don't think works, even the Encore cut, it doesn't work entirely as a full-formed narrative. Lane really understood her character and brought a lot to the movie. Then chapter 2, I'm calling this chapter The Crack in the Glass, because after this promising young season, really her 90s are largely uneventful. She does movies like Jack and Judge Dredd and doesn't always get chances at starring vehicles, and when she does, they're not that good, and even in the movies that she does pick in these supporting roles, the movies are pretty poor. So she is in this sort of lost period where many times when we're talking about movie stars, we talk about them having great taste. I think Tom Cruise is a great actor, but the reason why he's one of the best movie stars of all time and is still having billion-dollar box office movies is because he has great taste. He knows what a great script is, how to work with great directors, and has been lucky in that certain respect. But also I think he brings a lot of taste and quality sort of control to his own career. Where Diane Lane was maybe a little bit less successful in choosing the sort of quality projects, and because of that, I think her sort of movie star dwindled in the 90s. She doesn't have, a disappointing end to maybe that very promising rookie season. But because she's so young, she has many opportunities. And in 99, she stars in A Walk on the Moon, which gets her an Indie Spirit nomination for Best Actress. So there's critical appreciation for that. She starts to come back and be like, oh, okay, Diane Lane, she's still a great actress. Finally, in a good role. We've been waiting for that. And then from 99, she's in Perfect Storm or Hardball, in which she does these sort of supporting roles, but the movies are sort of more Hollywood mainstream. Perfect Storm, for example, is a big hit, so she has a little bit of momentum there. And then she stars in Unfaithful, a big, $50 million erotic thriller based on the fact that she starred in A Walk on the Moon. And then that really sort of cements her and codifies her as, oh wow, this is the Diane Lane movie star. This is her sort of big movie. The movie does well at the box office, gets her an Oscar nomination, which is kind of rare for that kind of a movie. But it sort of reminds everyone that, hey, I'm Diane Lane, I'm still a very good actor, and I can deliver these capital G great performances, even if the movie's not that great. And then from Unfaithful, sort of positions that off of to really much, 10 years, I'd say, of leading roles that do well at the box office that sort of fit her mold. So Under the Tuscan Sun, she's great in. Nights in Rodanthe, she's great in the mid-2000s, even in a movie like Secretariat. These are movies where she's the lead of the movie, and they're not sort of mega blockbusters, but they do well, and they allow her to sort of continue to make the next one and star in the next one, in which in the 90s was looking pretty grim and pretty dark, but in the 2000s, even if the movies aren't 100% Rotten Tomatoes style movies, they're still very well appreciated and do well enough at the box office to sort of make her this sort of middle-aged movie star, which is odd for a lot of people. Many times we're talking about actresses and young actresses, they are peak this sort of in that period of being youthful and being charming and being attractive. And Diane Lane had all those abilities, but she, I think, is much more suited in the sort of 40s kind of an area, the sort of post-divorce, sort of marriage, mom kind of type roles. I think she's excelled in, and that maturity that was recognized in A Little Romance is starting to actually sort of fit her persona a little bit better now with age. So when talking about a defining role of this period, I ultimately did go with Unfaithful, the Adrian Lyne erotic thriller, in which Diane Lane gets her one and only Oscar nomination. And I do think that as someone who starts cheating on her husband and has this extramarital affair, despite the fact that she doesn't have sort of this outward motivation. So it's a very fascinating character because we don't really fully understand why she's doing this, which I think adds to the mystery and to the suspense of the film. But then even more so, I think Diane Lane's character doesn't understand herself necessarily why she's doing that. That she knows it's sort of wrong and she's not supposed to be doing this, but still, despite that, there's a sense of pleasure and thrill that comes along with it. So it's an interesting sort of a dilemma and an interesting character that we don't see too often. And I think Lane sort of grabbed onto that and really sort of accentuated that, because oftentimes we can see that she's conflicted, but we can see because, of course, on one hand she enjoys it, but then also knows that it's wrong. Just some of the sort of glances that she's able to pull off, the communication that is said without any dialogue. Sometimes they will over-explain it, but oftentimes it's just the glances between her and Richard Gere, or some of the sort of ability to turn it on and off within sort of the dual eye that she has within her character. And then particularly the sort of last 30 minutes of the movie, when she's confronted by it, it's a fascinating sort of meltdown / supportive, maybe reclamation of their love. And I think Lane's ability to really add to the mystery and the sort of suspense and the thriller aspect of the movie is equally matched by her ability to understand the sort of complexity within her characters. And because she's able to do that, I think just a real fascination of Diane Lane, where she's able to be subtle and quiet, that she's so great at doing that, but still portray some of that intelligence and that conflict, that internal conflict, that she's also so great at. So Unfaithful, classic sort of erotic thriller, she's so great in it. And once again, teaming with Richard Gere, and maybe that's the sort of secret sauce there, but really helped her, and it's of course a defining role because this is the movie that really jump-started her and brought her back to being a mainstream movie star. And then in Chapter 3, I'm calling this the Steely support, because if you look at the past 10 years, pretty much from 2013 on, she's only done 9 movies, and 3 of those movies have been DC movies, in which she does Man of Steel, Justice League, and Batman v Superman. And then even if you consider, the Snyder Cut being its own sort of thing, you can consider that 4 out of 10. So almost half of the movies, a third of the movies that she's done in these past 10 years were DC movies. And I think that's sort of indicative of where the Hollywood has gone, but also sort of her role now as a movie star in the 2010s and now into the 2020s, where she will play sort of an older mother figure like Let Him Go, or she'll play the mother figure, the supporting sort of steely, strong support in something like a Man of Steel and those movies. And she's only 57, but she is sort of leaning into these sort of more wrinkles on her face. She's not someone that sort of jumped into the plastic surgery. She's still very beautiful at her age, but is allowing herself to age more, which allows her to be in these more almost grandmotherly-esque kind of figures. Someone that still is able to use some of her damage and her baggage that she's so great at showing. And that's why she's so great as sort of a mature movie star. So this sort of last chapter as a steely support of a lot of these movies does work well in terms of her persona, and she does have some interesting movies, but also she's only 57. There's going to be a great long career of her, but I do think this is the sort of last final chapter of her as she starts embracing her age, as she starts doing more of the supporting roles. She will sort of be into that kind of a mold. And then even if you want to consider, the Man of Steel movies, and then something like Let Me Go, she has sort of morphed into this sort of country grandmother, Yellowstone adjacent kind of a movies. And that's sort of this period right now, and she'll probably evolve out of that, but I do think that will be sort of her legacy from here on out as a sort of steely supporting character. So my defining role ultimately was Let Him Go, because I think it's an interesting movie, like I said, almost Yellowstone adjacent, with Kevin Costner teaming up once again post Man of Steel, but playing still a very interesting mother figure in which she's trying to get her grandson back as sort of out of an abusive family who was sort of moved a few hours away after the death of her son, who was the father of the boy. So there's some internal conflict, and I think much of the success of the movie has to do with her character and her sort of internal conflict, in which she wants to sort of get this grandson for personal reasons, but also for moral reasons that we understand as an audience member, that the wee boys aren't necessarily the most upstanding members of society, and that this is sort of an abusive and a toxic kind of environment for the boy. But also we understand that Diane Lane's reasons aren't necessarily purely moral herself, that she has this sort of grief that she hasn't necessarily been dealing with in regards to her son her son's death, and does believe in a way that that grandson will fill that need. So it is sort of an interesting, complex conflict of her character that oftentimes drives the plot of the film. So seeing Diane Lane once again another leading role opposite, in this case, Kevin Costner, allowing her to shine, allowing her to be a complex character. When she's getting these roles, she often does excel with them. She's always interested in character, it seems like, rather than plot, because I do notice a lot of her movies have some sort of questionable logic sometimes, but still this one ultimately positively well reviewed, and I do think, despite its sort of poor box office at the time, has been one that has been rewatched and is on cable. I see it on planes as well, so it is a movie I think that will last. So at least in this sort of later period here of Diane Lane, Let Him Go was one I wanted to talk about. And then her defining feature, I titled this video The Lost Great for two reasons. On one hand, it is a commentary on her overall sort of movie star career, but I also think it's a comment on the type of roles that she takes. That on one hand, she is the sort of lost great. That I don't think she's had her capital G great movie, the same way the Cruises, the Swayzes, or some of her co-stars early on in their careers had. Even something like a Richard Gere has with Pretty Woman and Runaway Bride and Primal Fear. Her movies aren't always critically reviewed, but she's always great in them. That's why I always think she's the lost great, because we don't always necessarily consider her in the sort of movie canon, despite her being a truthfully great actor. The fact that, in my opinion, she's only had one Oscar nomination, I think, in my opinion, that's almost a travesty. She should have multiple. She should be a well-respected, Glenn Close-esque kind of a well-respected actor. But also, the lost great, I think, can also mean the type of roles that she plays. Of course, Diane Lane, I think, is one of the most beautiful actors to have ever lived. She still is beautiful, and right from sort of the beginning, that was sort of leveraged and utilized with her. Even in an erotic thriller like Unfaithful, she uses that sort of sexuality that she innately brings because of her attractive good looks. It's almost sort of an undeniable factor that it has to be touched upon, which, Unfaithful has a great sort of friend scene with that. So because of her sort of natural good looks, she plays sort of these oftentimes idyllic characters who have a great marriage and who are really nice too. She's pretty, but she's also nice. She's in a great marriage. She's in sort of a great period of her life, right? But that's what the great Diane Lane movies don't do. They don't just lean right into how pretty and how great she is. They start to lean into the fact that she is seemingly great. She's seemingly sort of pretty and has no problems, but actually does have some elements to her. That she is this sort of lost great. That she's sort of seemingly this great person, perfect, pretty person, but is lost in many instances and unfaithful. She doesn't always understand why she's having this sort of extramarital affair, but she is. Under the Tuscan Sun, she's married to this person, then gets divorced and is told that this person that she loves never loved her, and it sort of rocks her world, and she's lost and doesn't know what to do. Knights in Rodanthe, the same thing. She's sort of in this period of chaos. The Cotton Club, she knows she needs to get out of this sort of relationship, but can't. She's kind of lost. And we see the greatness in her and in her many of her characters, but her characters are still trying to figure things out, despite her sort of appearance that she's this perfect, has it together, happy family, marriage kind of woman. Which is why I think she succeeded so much later in her life. That it makes sense when we watch a movie like A Little Romance and you go, man, this girl's 14, she's incredible, she's so mature, she seems like she's had so many years to her. But then that's why she almost doesn't work in the sort of 90s and the 80s, in which she doesn't always have that sort of youthfulness. There's always something damaged about her. I think there's always a lack of innocence to her, that she seems like a woman, even in something like The Cotton Club, that has lived a life, that has had some trauma in her past. Which is why I think her sort of persona didn't catch up to her and succeed until she was in her 40s, in which she can be the sort of divorcee and has to get her life together. She can be the woman who's cheating on her husband and has that extraneous kind of affair. And because of her age, it allows her to sort of utilize her lack of innocence, the fact that she loves, because she's 40 years old, it makes sense that she's a woman with a long life or has a marriage but is now starting a new chapter. So it makes sense she has a past, because she has quite literally lived one in these movies and because of her career. But then also, because of her sort of more mature success as a movie star, it allows her to show off her intelligence that she's always had, sort of that cool reservation. She's never someone that always seems like she's going to burst and have this big, over-the-top performance, which is why, something like A Perfect Storm doesn't always work for me, because I do appreciate her as more of a reserved, as a quiet, always feels like a real person with real baggage, real sort of damage. So when she brings sort of over to the topness to her movies, it doesn't always work because it doesn't allow her to play off with her intelligence. So she does succeed here as that sort of lost great, as blank characters who are lost, who need to confront something, which is why I think her sort of success became later on into her 40s, because, like I said, allows her to show off her intelligence, but also allows that sort of lack of innocence, that sort of damage, that baggage that she brings to so many of her roles, just intuitively makes more sense. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. Let me know your thoughts on your favorite Diane Lane movies. She's a little bit of an odd one, maybe not one that we thought we would sort of talk about, maybe not on the level of a Meryl Streep in terms of the legacy of cinema, but I really do think she is one of my favorite performers, and somebody that deserves a lot of respect. So give it up for Diane Lane. Comment below, like I said, your favorite Diane Lane movie. But until then, stay tuned.